morning. This is Tuesday, May 17th. Welcome to the House Senate Conference Committee on Taxes. Yesterday, we went through a significant part of the bill. Today, we're going to start where we left off. I will announce there's a quorum. And just note, just to get kind of a roadmap for today, we believe that we will get through the remaining, about 20 pages of the bill, the side-by-side, right away this morning. Then we plan to go into recess, and as chairs, Chair Marquart and I will have discussions about what we see, what we've learned, and looking toward ways forward. So with that, we're going to start in the Senate books, it's page 21, but it's Article 6 of the side-by-side. And we're going to start with item, it would be the same, actually, section number for both, 13. And these are the specific TIF proposals. So if we could have the House and Senate staff come up to the testifying table and go through these proposals, that would be terrific. Oh, and Mr. Cope is on Zoom. Okay, Mr. Sylvia, you are in person here. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and start with the House on 13, Article 13. That'd be Mr. Cope, and then we'll go to Mr. Sylvia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't believe we discussed the City of Hopkins special legislation, which is Section 12 of Article 6 of the House bill.
Thank you so much for catching that. No, we did not mean to omit Hopkins. Let's start with Section 12.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Section 12 would amend existing rules governing Hopkins TIF District number 2-11. This would be removing a 20% cap on expenditures outside the district for housing and blight correction and increasing a total cap on expenditures outside the district for that from 25% to 30%. And that has no Senate comparable provision. Section 13 of Article 6 amends existing rules for the City of Savage. This would be further extending the 5-year rule, which had been extended to 8 years in the 2014 special legislation to 11 years. And it would be extending the time period during which the districts can be enlarged from 5 years to 8 years. The Senate's Article 8, Section 13 is similar and has the same language, except for one instance they use 5-year period instead of 5-year rule.
Thank you. Mr. Sylvia.
Madam Chair, members, Senate Article 8, Section 14 is an authorization for the City of Shakopee, and this would authorize the city to create multiple TIF districts until December 2026 under special rules, provided that the city find that 70% of the defined area has peat or other geotechnical difficulties, landfills, dumps, quarries, gravel pits, etc. The authority can establish any TIF districts in this area other than an economic development or housing district. If established pursuant to these special rules, the 5-year rule for all districts would be extended to 8 years, and the permitting pooling percentage would be increased from 20 to 80%. In addition, a new soil deficiency district would be authorized to be established within the project area if 70% of the area has unusual terrain or soil deficiencies that require substantial filling, and the estimated correction costs exceed the fair market value of the property. The House has no comparable provision to the City of Shakopee's authorization.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sylvia. Mr. Cope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Section 14 of Article 6 of the House bill would establish special rules for Fridley TIF District number 20 and would allow the district to use the out-of-district percentage of increment on housing programs with the Fridley Housing and Redevelopment Authority. It would also be subjecting the authority to financial reporting requirements and would require the district to report to the legislature in 2024 and 2026 on its use of increment.
Thank you.
Section 15 of Article 6 would establish special rules for a TIF district in the city of Plymouth. This would allow Plymouth to establish a redevelopment district at a defined location, subject to special rules that would exempt it from the blight test and the requirement that its increment be spent on blight correction. It would also be allowing increment generated from the district to be spent on improvements to Hendon County Road 47 without having those expenditures count against its out-of-district pooling percentages.
Thank you, Mr. Cope.
And then last is section 16, which is the same as Senate Article 8, section 15, which would be enacting special legislation for the city of Woodbury's TIF district number 13. This would extend the duration of the district and allow it to spend increment on improvements and upgrades to Central Park.
Mr. Sylvia.
Madam Chair, members, the Senate provision is identical in Article 8, Section 15.
Thank you. Members, then we'll move on to Article 7. This is local taxes. Mr. Cope, if you'd like to start with Section 1 and...
I believe Mr. Clement discussed Article 7 last night.
Yes. That's right. We went a little out of order last night, so we are looking for the Senate sections, which have not yet been discussed. So we'll start with Ms. Pollock.
Madam Chair and members, the Senate Article 7, Section 1 provides some modifications to the general law governing voter approval of local sales taxes that are authorized by the legislature. The local jurisdiction can elect to not include all projects approved by the legislature on the ballot and may elect to include all authorized projects in one question or present a separate question for each project. And it specifies that the ballot question must state the project or projects funded with the tax, the amount for each project, and the estimated length of time that the tax would be in effect. And this is effective retroactively to the sales taxes authorized in the 2021 bill. Section 2 clarifies that a town or a county, when the county board is acting as a town board with respect to an unorganized territory, can enter into an agreement with the commissioner to collect and administer a local lodging tax. Mr. Clayman described Section 4 yesterday. Section 3 of the Senate article is the same with respect to the Rochester local sales tax authorization extension. Section 4 has 3 of the same projects in the Senate bill as the House bill. The Senate provides an additional authorization of $50 million for a housing vitality fund. Section 5 is similar to the House Section 6. There's a slight difference in the paragraph structure, as is indicated a number of times throughout the side-by-side here. The termination of taxes in Senate Section 6, House Section 7 is the same. The same provision for the Cook County lodging tax appears in both the Senate and the House bills. The City of Marshall extension is the same. Is similar. It would allow the city to extend their current tax to fund an additional $16 million for an aquatic center. There is a slight difference in the paragraph structure for the bonding authorization in the Senate bill. Moving on to the next page of the side-by-side, Section 9 of the Senate article authorizes the city of Moorhead to collect its local sales tax for up to 30 years. Last year in the 2021 bill, we authorized the city to collect its tax for 22 years. Similarly, in Section 10, the Senate article authorizes the city of Oakdale to collect its tax for up to 30 years, which is an increase from 25 years as authorized in the bill last year. Section 11 provides a modification to the Waite Park local sales tax authorization from last year, and it allows an additional project for which the sales tax revenue may be used, which is to fund up to $15 million for the 10th Avenue Regional Corridor project. Sections 12 and 13 provide corresponding language for the bonding authority and the termination of taxes for that Waite Park authorization. Section 14 in the Senate article is similar to the House article. The bonding authority is different in that it provides a lump sum total as opposed to listing out the separate amount for each project, and there's a slight difference in paragraph structure. Similarly, in section 15 of the Senate article, the bonding authority is combined into one amount, and there's a slight difference in paragraph structure for the City of Black Duck authorization. Section 16 for the City of Bloomington, the Senate allows the sales tax revenues to be used for an additional project, which should be $15 million plus associated bonding costs for construction and improvements to the Dewan Golf Course and associated infrastructure. The Senate also uses a total amount for the bonding authority and has a slight difference in the paragraph structure. Section 17, the City of Brooklyn Center, it is the same authorization. There's a slight difference in the paragraph structure. East Grand Forks, Senate Section 18, is similar in the authorization of the two projects, but it provides a lump sum amount of $21.5 million for the bonding authority and also contains a slight difference in paragraph structure. Section 19 is the City of Golden Valley local sales tax authorization, and as Mr. Clayman mentioned last night, there is an error in the side-by-side here. The local sales tax would be, it's indicated here as 0.5%, and it should be 0.75%. The bonding authority language is slightly different in that it allows a lump sum amount of $73 million for the two projects, and there's a slight difference in the paragraph structure. Similarly, Section 20 in the House and the Senate article is authorization for the City of Henderson, and there's a slight difference in the paragraph structure for the bonding authority. Section 21 is contained in the Senate article. There's no comparable provision in the House article, allowing Lake of the Woods County to impose a lodging tax of up to 3%, except for the City of Baudette or any other city that currently imposes a lodging tax under general law. And the total tax in the county must not exceed 3%. Revenues are to be used to fund a new Lake of the Woods County Event and Visitors Bureau. Section 22 of the Senate article authorizes a number of, authorizes the City of Park Rapids to impose a 0.5% local sales tax to fund a number of street projects in the City of Park Rapids. The total amount of the bonding authority is $8,799,500, and the tax would terminate at the earlier of 20 years or when the revenues are sufficient to pay the bonds plus associated costs. Section 22 is the City of Proctor authorization. It is the same authorization for the project of $3.85 million for a new regional trail in the city. The Senate allows the same bonding authority, but includes two additional paragraphs that are generally included with the bonding authority provisions for the local sales tax authorizations. Section 24 in the Senate article is the authorization for Rice County. It is the same authorization, except there's a slight difference in the paragraph structure for the bonding authority. Section 22 authorizes the City of Roseville to impose a 0.5-cent sales tax for 3 projects. The Senate language is, Senate Section 25, House Section 22. The Senate language is similar. It provides a bonding authorization for a full amount of $65 million plus an amount needed to cover the bonding costs. There's a slight difference in the paragraph structure here as well. Winona County, the authorization is similar. Is the same, except that there's a slight difference in the paragraph structure for the bonding authority. Mr. Clayman covered the City of Woodbury. Yesterday, the Senate has no comparable provision. And then finally, in Section 27 of the Senate article, this is a provision that would be a response to some pandemic and other current situations relating to construction cost increases that have come about over the last year. authorizing local jurisdictions that received approval in the 2021 Omnibus bill to impose a local sales tax and that have not held their election, to increase the amounts that were authorized in the legislation last year by a total of $3 million. The total increase must not exceed $3 million, so it is a per jurisdiction authorization, not a per project. And the governing body of the local jurisdiction that is seeking to exercise this authority must adopt a new resolution indicating the updated project cost and file the resolution with the state auditor by August 31st of the year that the jurisdiction presents the tax for voter approval. And the ballot question must indicate this new approved amount in the updated resolution. The section also allows an increase of up to 10% of project costs if there are any local sales taxes authorized in the current article or the current bill if it were to be enacted this year. Again, that updated resolution must be enacted by the local jurisdiction and must be filed with the state auditor by August 31st of the year the question is put to the voters. Madam Chair, that concludes the Senate local sales tax article.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock. And before we move on to Article 8, I will just mention, since this is a Senate-only priority or issue, I want to just say, why would we do this? It's different. One of the things that we heard, and you may have heard also, particularly Chair Joachim, as people were coming back after they had got their authority last year, but when you think about construction costs, things were highly volatile during this time. And of course, they don't have another way to finance those extraordinary costs. So this was similar to what we have done in many, many ways throughout these last 2 years of pandemic. We've allowed some different timelines, or we've taken into account the needs during those 2 years. And so this was an effort to help those who had got their authorization, and then we had, lumber go up so dramatically, maybe 22%. So, and the $3 million seemed to cover those that had gotten their authorization last year. And yet we want to make sure that we never get in the way of voters, and that's why there needs to be that resolution. So I wanted to make sure that the House was a little bit aware of what that was all about. It came as a result of what we saw coming before committee. And Chair Joachim.
Definitely not tall enough to reach that button over there. Thank you, Madam Chair, for explaining that. I think you and I both have run into the issue of feeling like we're building the plane while we're flying it with the flip of the way local option sales tax was done before COVID, and then the COVID year not really having to address them, and now we're into a new way of doing this and wanting to be transparent both with the cities and the citizens. And I like the language trying to help the cities out that passed resolutions last year. And I know myself and Senator Rest carried a bill to even clarify a little bit more that if there's a change in something, that it should come again as a resolution from the city before January 31st. And we relayed that to a lot of the cities, and some of them did take us up on that and kind of, I want to say, follow the rules that we'd set in place. And wondering if I know you'd had a hearing on that bill, wondering how you feel about the January 31st resolution. A little concerned that two of our projects that did follow the rules and come back with a new resolution did not get placed in the bill. One didn't even get a hearing. So would like to discuss that further. But want to ask a quick question about the language around the lump sum when it comes to putting it on the ballot.
Yes,
with the bond.
before you get to that question, let me answer your previous question. And that was regarding the two provisions that came before the Senate that were not included. Again, this was COVID-related pandemic relief in these local option sales taxes. My recollection is that the two that were not in the Senate proposal were not pandemic COVID supply chain shortage relief. They were like an additional new sheet of ice, for example. And I think they were more than 100%. So it wasn't just like a bit of assistance to get through the volatility of the supply chain shortages and the dramatic upticks in construction costs, but they were additional projects. And again, the request was for either over 100% more or near. And I don't believe there's anything that would prohibit them from, so, but they did not fit into this particular piece. It was not a pandemic related thing. So that's why they were not included. Yes.
Thank you,
Chair
Madam.
Yuki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, both of them put in new resolutions on January 31st because they wanted to expand what they were doing because they got more voter input. One, I'll make a pitch for Park Rapids. Once they started remodeling, looking at remodeling their ice center, not Park Rapids, Grand Rapids, they wanted to expand, they needed to expand their parking lot to be able to facilitate that amount of people in. So Grand Rapids had, yes, expanded their project because of that, but they came with the resolution, they put a bill in, they followed all of the rules, and their project fits our criteria. Same with Edina. They had more voter input, they wanted to expand their project, and frankly, they actually, when they first came in, last year, we had removed 2 of the projects because they were roads, and we had made a decision, and it's in statute that capital projects should not include roads or sewer or water. And they came back in and said, look, you gave us the authority for so many years for a cost, but our projects will be done before then. We would like to make sure that we make the project more robust because that's what our voters want. And it's going to have to go to the voters. I worked with them to scale back the years so they won't be going to the voters for as long. So they were very responsible. So I hate to punish cities like Grand Rapids and Edina for being responsible and following the rules that were on the books. So that's just a little bit about those projects. The one question I had about the lump sum payment, just trying to understand that a little bit more, because we also not only want the transparency with the cities, we want the transparency with the voters, and making sure we have more stuff on the ballot's really important. And then I had one other question after that one, too.
Okay, well, hang on to that question. We'll get right back to that. Regarding not having the individualized, I think your projects voted on in the referendum, we had a lot of discussion about that. And what we found is that the projects are itemized as they, the state auditor, the cities have to report all of this to the state auditor who really keeps all of those details in line. But what we heard, I don't know that anyone was expecting this, but what we heard in committee was the number of times that this was restricting individuals or individual cities because of, again, the pandemic-related swings and costs. We thought we took care of part of it with this, but also the question about, I think Senator Bach actually brought this up in committee, and regarding if one project comes in too high, one comes in too low, let him kind of further delve into that. We just felt it was a little too restrictive. Senator Bach.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Yoakim, this issue was first brought to me by the city of Hermantown, who we authorized a local option sales tax vote in last year's session. They haven't conducted the vote yet, but the city's very concerned about, in the base question, they say they're going to raise the sales tax by 0.5%, and then they list all the projects. And their concern is that voters will think that they're going to raise it 0.5% for each of the projects, that the sales tax increase is actually 1.5%, not 0.5%. And they haven't been able to figure out a way to craft that ballot question so it doesn't look to a lot of voters, and we won't let them promote it, right? So we're not gonna let them spend any money trying to explain to the voters what the situation really is. So I do think this area needs some work. I think in talking to the League of Cities, there's a number of cities with concerns just like this. So I don't know that the Senate proposal is perfect, but I do think we gotta spend a little time and try to figure it out so it doesn't appear that the sales tax is gonna be raised 3, 4, 5 times because there's more than one project.
Thank you, Senator Bach. Chair Yuki.
Thank you, Senator Bach. That's a really good point, and then maybe we can work on it a little bit more to explain on the ballot question that it's like the 0.5 cent, but then underneath, still list the projects individually so voters know what they're voting on and how much those are going to cost. I just really want to make sure there's transparency, and I know the reason why Senator Rest and I put a bill together too was actually with the league saying about a lot of the concerns of the league was concerned that cities were putting forward the bill last year, but because statute said general election instead of each election cycle, they felt like they had to wait a year, and then they ran into the construction costs going up, so then we had to fix that. So some of that clarifying language, I think, would clear that up, that's in the House bill about the January 31st every year if you come back and want to expand something. I had also added in an amendment onto that I know you didn't get a chance to discuss, but I would love to talk about that too, and is that nexus language. So last year, we defined capital projects. This year, I was looking at trying to figure out how to define regional, and the best way I could look at it was that kind of nexus. We expect local option sales tax to be predominantly paid by people coming from out of the city, and in my mind, if that's what's going to happen, then those that are coming in from out of the city paying those taxes should have the ability to access those projects that they're paying for. It just seems to make sense. And a lot of our projects in here completely fit into that. Also, part of that nexus is if a project feels like they have to expand to accommodate that, that would be the parking lot in Grand Rapids, that the project is a regional good if it is pulling people into town for more than 15 or 20 minutes, so it's not just a road that you're driving by. So really kind of looking at that nexus language so that we're being fair to the citizens paying the tax, but then also giving the city the flexibility and the clarity, and then also the clarity for the voters too. So I'd love to continue to talk about that. And then I just had, I guess I was wrong, I have two other questions. One, we didn't hear the Shakopee bill, so I'd like to learn a little bit more about the pooling. I know we've done pooling at 40%, usually 80% seemed high. Wanted to hear from nonpartisan staff. And then also to have nonpartisan staff clarify how we defined capital projects last year. Because I'm seeing road projects in here again, and I could have sworn we kind of really put a line in the sand on those. So anybody that could answer my question would be
Chair
great.
Yuki, I think in the essence of time, just to know that we are going to ask you and Chair Weber to kind of work through the details on the local option sales taxes. But if you need something today, we'll get to that right away. But again, we want to really have that working group. I believe Senator Rest is going to help with that as well. So we really want to work towards that. But further comments kind of to the general, Senator Bach.
Well, Madam Chair, because I won't be on the working group working on these local taxes, maybe the House can tell us in their section 22 of Article 7, the proposal to allow the city of Woodbury to dedicate 2/3 of the revenue of their lodging tax for some purpose other than marketing. I just want to, and Chair Marco, maybe you can tell us who the author of that was. I don't remember us hearing that in the Senate.
Chair
Senator
Marquart.
Bach, it was Representative Sandell.
Well, to those of you that are gonna be here next year, just let me urge some caution on that. You know, the lodging tax has always been 95% of it spent on marketing, and we have been very judicious on not allowing carve-outs of spending on other purposes. Now, having said that, two of the carve-outs are in my district, one in Proctor and one in Hermantown. But they're pretty narrow, and I believe they're 10%. So I just would urge some caution. You're gonna see a flurry of bills coming forward if you do this, wanting people to redirect lodging tax. And once you go down that road, it's gonna be hard to turn that ship around, because I do think the lodging tax is doing a very, very good job of promoting our communities. So just would be cautious about that.
Thank you, Senator Bach. Senator Joachim. I mean, Representative
It's okay. Chair Joachim works well too.
about
So I understand the essence of time, but I would really like for the public, for nonpartisan staff to go over quickly, because as Senator Bach said, not everybody will be in that private working group working on these issues. How we defined capital projects last year.
We can allow for that. Ms. Pollack?
Madam Chair, the definition of capital project is a single building or structure including associated infrastructure needed to safely access or use the building or structure, improvements within a single park or named recreation area, or a contiguous trail.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock. Chair Yuki.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Pollock. And I know we had put that language in to very specifically leave out projects that should be done and borne by the city or the county, and those were roads and sewer and water. So I just wanted to put that out there and make sure it was on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Joachim. And as new, this would be the first time that sales taxes have come before us with that new stipulation. And we did learn a lot along the way regarding how it may be a little bit too tight, particularly for regional centers. So these are things that we will discuss going forward, but I know that that's what we do here, get new laws, we see how they work, we amend things, and we make them better. So we want to make sure that we continue meeting the needs through our local option sales taxes for regional centers also. There was one other thing that I wanted to just note for the good of the order, and I know the subcommittee will continue to work on this. And I think perhaps, Chair Yuki, one of your questions had to do with individual ballot questions for the individual items in the local option sales tax. And that was another area that came up that was maybe a little bit, well, first of all, the idea is correct, right? You want voters not to be sucked into one horrible project when they like a lot of things on the ballot. And so with keeping with that in mind, what we found, I hadn't planned on it, but what we found was that as cities came forward, the prescriptiveness of one ballot question per item was one duplicative to what the state auditor does, because obviously the state auditor tracks all of that information. But there became this concern, I started to mention it earlier, particularly in this time, that with fluctuating construction costs, what do you do if one item comes in over budget and another comes in under budget? It's the same amount for the taxpayers, but according to this prescriptiveness of these individual questions, it would cause a problem, particularly, as I said, in those larger areas. So after learning the state auditor really monitors all of those things, obviously the bond houses do too, the Senate position was that the need to make sure that is even stronger if there is only one vote. In other words, if there's one vote for the project as described with the items as in the past, that it really behooves the city not to put a clunker on there. Because not only will the clunker go down, the whole thing will go down. So I do believe that the way the sales tax questions were done in the past actually provided even greater power to the citizens, because it was an all or nothing thing for the cities. And so we did not want to dilute that power. And I know that was not your intention either. So I think that might get to a little bit of one of the other questions that I thought I heard there. So, all right. Well, we will look forward to, yes, Chair.
Yeah,
Chair
thank you
Marquart.
very much, Madam Chair. I mean, one reason the House is taking a closer look at these local option sales tax and trying to restrict them is that I think, from House research, I got some information that in just the last couple of years, we've approved almost $1 billion of new local option sales tax if you add them up. And without the legislature kind of thinking about it, we have literally raised the effective sales tax rate, I think it's up to like 7.5% or something, because of what we're doing with all this. So we're kind of increasing the sales tax rate, piecemealing it. And so I think there's a concern there, and that's when they just start coming in. And I've always been very concerned about kind of those cities that have the economic wherewithal and those that do not. And especially in rural Minnesota, you've got the regional and sub-regional centers that have an economic base where they can do this. And you have a lot of the other cities that simply don't have the option to do it. but yet they go to these other communities and pay this extra cost. And so I'm not saying I'm opposed to local option sales tax, of course,
Yes.
but I think it is important to have some real guardrails, and I think the tighter they could be is probably the better. But I think this is all good discussion. all
Thank
this.
you, Chair Marquardt. I would just say, I think you are correct in those many who drive into those regional centers should be able to benefit as well. And I think that is true. I would just note one thing. We did not approve $1 billion in sales taxes. Those were the elected, or the voters who have voted to do that. But, and just not to let this moment go by, because I think it is so important. One thing I've learned as a tax chair and as the education chair, you probably as well, is that communities, school districts are so incredibly different that there's just not a one-size-fits-all, which is why we have things like LGA for some of our cities, not all of our cities. We have funding for small towns, for streets, but not for all cities. So as we look at these things, we have to realize these are one tool in the toolbox, and every city, every school district is incredibly different on their needs, and they don't have exactly the same tool either. So we have to be very flexible in that regard. Okay, good question, good comments on local option sales taxes. Senator Weber and Chair Yukim, we'll look forward to you taking those thoughts forward as you work through those. Okay, I believe we're ready to move on now to Article 8, which is the renter's tax credit. And Mr.
Williams from House Research.
Mr. Williams.
Chair Nelson and members, Article 8 of the House bill is the renter's tax credit. This article converts the current renter's credit program into a refundable income tax credit. It would be effective for 2022 refunds, which are payable next year. So the first year that this would take place would be on tax returns filed early next year. The amount of the credit would be calculated largely in the same manner as it's calculated under current law as a standalone program. Although the bill would simplify the measure of income used to calculate the credit. So under current law, the renter's credit is calculated using household income, which is a broad measure of income that includes many forms of non-taxable income. And under the House bill, the measure of income used for the renter's credit would be adjusted gross income. I'm not going to go section by section through this because much of the language in this article is converting existing language that's in Chapter 290A, that's the property tax refund chapter, into Chapter 290, which is the income tax chapter. So there's some duplicative administrative provisions in 290A that are being moved into 290. There's some cases where there's language in 290A that deals only with the renter's credit, so that's being stricken and then moved into Chapter 290. Sort of the substance of this article would be this conversion to an income tax credit and then the change to the income measure used to calculate the credit. But otherwise, the algorithm table, which you may have seen in statute, stays the same, and the process for calculating the credit stays the same. So I'm happy to answer more detailed questions about that.
Chair Marquardt.
So, well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I think it's no secret that this is the House top priority. So if I could just spend a minute or two just kind of describing what we're doing here. So prior to 1981, the renter's credit was on the income tax form. And then during those times, especially 1981, where we had several special sessions to balance the budget, it was a budget shift. So instead of, January through April, they moved it to August, September, basically as a shift. So what this would do is, let's say you have paid rent in 2021. By December 31st, you get a certificate of rent paid from your landlord that tells you how much rent you actually paid in cash or some other form. You actually had to pay that. And then the state has said, we're going to calculate and say 17% of that amount is rent, is property taxes as part of that rent. So right now, for 2021, you now have to wait, if you're a renter, till August or September to get the refund, 9 months. If the law was in effect, you would have been able to, once filing started in January, to file and get that immediately. So it's immediate, it's simpler, and there's two major changes that have been made. One is, as Mr. Williams said, you're moving from a household income to an AGI. And probably the largest and Mr. Williams can correct me, the largest of that kind of non-taxable that you have to count in household that you would not in AGI is non-taxable Social Security benefits. That's probably the largest area. So, for example, especially for senior citizens, so we're talking both House and the Senate about exempting Social Security benefit, for taxes. So that doesn't help a senior who's currently not paying any taxes on their Social Security. So let me give you one example. You could have a couple making $46,000 in total income, but let's say each of them are getting $18,000 so in Social Security. So that'd be $36,000 Social Security. When they go apply right now for the renter's credit, they have to include all $46,000 of their income. So you go to that chart that they have, they'd have to go to $46,000. But now on AGI, they would not have to count their Social Security. So that $46,000, actually now when they go to the chart, would only be $10,000. And I had calculated, I was using like a one-bedroom apartment or so for $700, $800 a month. They would save almost they would get an extra $1,000 in a refund, that senior citizen couple. So it's kind of a balancing act, especially if we move towards exempting more Social Security income, this is a way to get dollars to those seniors who currently are not paying dollars on Social Security benefits. It would be kind of a balancing act there. And the other change, and so the cost into the future, the first cost we talked about last night is that you're gonna have to pay twice for the credit. You're gonna have to pay this August, September in this budget year, and then next January, February. It'll fall into the same. That's why you get a $373 million primarily in the first biennium because it's twice. But the yearly cost after that, the increase is about $150 million. And it's for two reasons. One, because you're going to move from household to AGI, that will drop people's income. And now the maximum right now is $68,000 income on the renter's credit. So let's say you could be now 80, but if you have this Social Security, it doesn't count. Now you drop down, you now qualify. And they anticipate about 36,000 more filers would qualify moving from household to AGI. And most of those are senior citizens. Because of Social Security. The other reason is that the Department of Revenue anticipates right now about 318,000 folks take the renter's credit. They're saying because moving from a refund to the income tax would increase that by about 120,000. So it would move the participation rate up from 65 to 70% into the 90%. And so that's another reason for that cost. And so there's no changes in anything as far as eligibility. We're not changing anything. It's just moving from household to AGI, and then the fact that the participation rate will increase. That's the cost. There's no other changes at all. But, just as an idea, when you look at the numbers, and the Department of Revenue has this, is that about 30% statewide of those who get the renter's credit are senior citizens and those with disability. But in about 20 counties, all in rural Minnesota, that senior disability count is 50% or more that get the renter's credit. It's huge. So anyway, I wanted to take a few minutes to explain that because this is our top priority and we're not reinventing the wheel with this because it was something that was, I think it came in first into effect in about 1975, the renter's credit or something like, okay. I'm thinking that was it because it came in, I think, at the same time as the homeowners, and that was 75. So first 6 years or so was, part of the income tax. And this makes it a credit, so it would, be on your income tax form and they'd get it. It's a refundable credit. We also have a provision that I think there's been a little misunderstanding is that because it's a new program, we know that some people may not realize that it's been a switch. So they're waiting for their check in August and September, and they say, well, you should have filed for, So we've authorized the Department of Revenue to come up with a way so that they can still figure out a form and that they could still, if they miss the deadline, or let's say they're not filing an income tax for whatever reason, they could still have a way to get that and say, oops, I didn't know the law was changed and so forth. But, so, thank you for your consideration on that. And I'll take any questions.
Well, I think we'll hold off on, well, I do have a couple questions. One is just the, I understand where you're going with this, and understand the need. I guess I'm questioning the ability to track, to track this. How does that work? So renters are very transient typically, and so there could be movement from, you know, one rental to another, or one city to another. And so wondering about that, and then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about all the issues that we had with the moratorium
Yeah.
on the housing moratorium, on evictions, and I'm just cautious
Yeah.
about implementing. You know, the value comes down to the implementation, so it could be a good idea, but do we have the ability and the resources to implement this, thinking about what happened with, and also with the, you know, the payment to the landlords, and then kind of the fraud in some of those areas. I'm just curious about how you see this translating into working on the street.
Yeah, Madam Chair, those are great questions. So to the first one, we know that during the pandemic, renters got some help and so forth. They would not qualify. They have to, the certificate of rent paid that they get is actually rent that they paid. So if they, let's say, received some aid that they didn't actually pay, they would not be able to, they wouldn't have that on their certificate of rent paid. And therefore, that would not qualify at all. As far as kind of the other questions you've asked, there are, I don't know if I have to do something.
You're okay.
Okay, so if you kind of look through the law and the current renter's credit, they have thought of about everything. And I can maybe turn it over to Mr. Williams, but even if two spouses came at the different, I mean, they have all of that already in law that kind of has all these safeguards on how long you might have lived. If there's more than two people sharing rent, how is that divided up and all that? And I don't know all those details, but I know it's in law, and I don't know if anyone could maybe talk to kind of some of all the regulations they have on just how to deal with the renter's credit and all the requirements. And
Mr. Williams.
Well,
Chair Nelson and Representative Marquart.
Williams.
You know, Chapter 290A has sort of a lot of existing rules for how landlords provide certificates of rent paid to tenants. And there's a requirement that they do it. There's penalties for landlords under current law if they don't provide these certificates of rent paid, indicating how much the individual paid. And the bill wouldn't make any substantive changes to those. There's cases where we're moving kind of equivalent requirements to what are in current law over into Chapter 290 for the income tax that are, you know, currently in Chapter 290A, the property tax refund chapter. So I'd say that, you know, to the extent there's issues tracking down renters, I don't think they would change in the bill. Those issues would apply to the current renters credit program as well.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Senator Rest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, Representative Marquart, we've been trying to do exactly this for over 20 years. What we didn't have in the last 20 years was an $8 billion surplus where we could afford that time lag. I mean, we did it, as Senator Bach pointed out, before I was here, but because we had to push the renters' credit, or whatever you wanted to call it, the refund, into the next biennium. We had to do that because otherwise we couldn't have it at all. But the program has worked pretty well. We went through a period of time where the certificate of rent paid had to actually reflect the taxes paid on an individual unit, but both, well, mostly I think landlords, if not renters as well, found that was an overburden, quite frankly, and we went to a system where there was an assumption of generally what is the percentage of rent that is attributable to taxes. And then the arguments became, well, is it 16% or 18%? And each major tax bill, there was a discussion about what, where that rate should be set. But, you know, there's a cost to this, but also the renter's credit, just like a lot of other things, or the income credit, however you want to call it, it's a scalable item. I mean, it is, it needn't cost exactly what you have in the House bill. It's not changing the policy, can change the, you can change the 68,000. You can change that number if that became a, you know, kind of a push point or something. But, you know, this is the time to do it, to get it to making sure that it gets to the most people who are eligible. And that's been one of the problems with the renter's credit. There's some people who file who only get that, and a lot of those folks, including senior citizens that you referenced, they'll go to a taxpayer assistance program, and that's the only thing they file for. But there are a lot of seniors that don't know to do that. And even though the department over time, both with the renter's credit and the working family credit, have put resources into publicizing the availability for those who are eligible to avail themselves of either one, there is still a segment of the population that is eligible, that is due it, that should get it, and that don't. And we never could figure out a way without a big cost, because the proposal has come up any number of times, to get the renter's credit and the homeowner's refund as well. Not the special refund, but the other one, the regular one, on the income tax form. We tried and tried and tried. And when I say we, I don't mean Democrats or Republicans. I mean the legislature tried to do that. I support this. I think you can find a way of making it maybe a little bit cheaper that might be more palatable to the Senate. Or you can find something that, quite frankly, that is important to the Senate that you trade for. I mean, that's the way we do things here. So we have been trying to do this. Maybe Senator Bach remembers too, from the mid-90s we tried to do this, and it just, we just never had a big enough surplus where other things weren't more important in terms of a list of priorities to do it. But it seems to me the policy's in place, it's well worked, and it is it's certainly a possible move forward that all of us should consider, and I hope we move toward.
Thank you, Senator Rest. Senator Bach.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and former Chair Davids might remember this, but back in 15 or 16, we were looking for a few nickels in the tax committee to pay for a few things, and we took away the working family credit from people that were not residents of Minnesota. It was a significant amount of money. It was millions of dollars that we were paying in the working family credit to people who were not residents of the state, but they had taxable income here. So my question is there a residency requirement with this? You know, and I don't know, it's probably not as many filers impacted as it was with the working family credit, but in some of our border cities, I'm just curious if there's a residency requirement. I think there should be, but
Thank you, Senator Bach.
Yeah.
Who might be able to answer that? Mr. Williams? You cannot escape.
Chair Nelson and members, maybe give me 2 minutes, to just pull up the language on that in the House.
Yes,
bill, if that's all
yes. All right, as Mr. Williams is pulling that up, so we always have the most accurate documents in front of us, I do want to know if there's any other comments from committee members on this issue or any other issue before we leave Article 8 here. Okay, seeing none, we'll go right to Mr. Williams regarding the residency requirement. Yes or no?
He's still fine.
Yeah.
Chair Nelson and members, one moment, please. Maybe we could have Mr. Cope walk through the Senate Council staff walk through the public finance article.
Sure,
I'll
we
get
can
back to
come
you.
back to this question. Let's just set this aside. Members, we'll move on to Article 9, and we'll start with Mr. Cope, who's online, and then I believe it'd be Ms. Pollock or Mr. Sylvia. Mr. Sylvia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The contents of House Article 9 are identical to the contents of Senate Article 6. For various political subdivisions, this article would be extending the duration limit on capital notes or certificates of indebtedness issued by those political subdivisions from 10 years to 20 years. So Section 1 would be extending the duration limit of certificates of indebtedness or capital notes issued by a school district from 10 years to 20 years. Section 2 would be extending the duration limit for certificates of indebtedness issued by a town from 10 years to 20 years. Section 3 would be extending the duration limit of capital notes issued by a county from 10 years to 20 years. Section 4 would be extending the duration limit of capital notes issued by Hennepin County from 10 years to 20 years. Section 5 would be extending the duration of capital notes issued by a home rule charter city from 10 years to 20 years. And last, Section 6 would be extending the duration limit of certificates of indebtedness or capital notes issued by a statutory city from 10 years to 20 years.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Cope. And Mr. Sylvia?
Madam Chair, members, as Mr. Cope indicated, Senate Article 6 is identical, just extending these duration limits. I will also note that the language still maintains that the equipment still have a useful or expected useful life equal to at least the length or terms of the capital note. So even though the extension is for another 10 years, if the actual useful life of whatever equipment piece is being financed is less than that, then that additional duration limit would apply.
Thank you, Mr. Sylvia. That's an important note.
Madam Chair,
Chair Marquart.
it looks like in the future, we have a same and similar we could adopt here.
I think we could, and we will get to that. Yeah, let's mark that. All right, very good. Looks exactly the same. Wonderful. Any other comments on Article 9, members or staff? I think we're all aligned there. Okay. Let's go on to Article 10. Mr. Williams, let's get to that answer regarding residency requirements. Mr. Williams.
So Chair Nelson and members, the treatment for non-residents in the House bill matches the treatment under current law, which is Minnesota residents only are eligible for the renter's credit. There is language in current law that's also included in the bill for part-year residents, indicating that they're eligible for the renter's credit for the portion of the year that they were of their Minnesota residency. So they get a partial credit based on the portion of the year that they resided in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Senator Bach? Okay, good question. All right, members, we're going to move on to Article 10. This is our, it's Article 10 in the House, Article 9 in the Senate. And Mr. Arneson, if you want to start with the Article 9 miscellaneous in the Senate.
Madam Chair and members,
Arneson.
Article 9, Senate side, Section 1, eliminates the current law statutory requirement that bills that create, renew, or continue a tax expenditure include a purpose statement. and a standard against which that expenditure's effectiveness can be measured. Instead, the language requires that the chairs of the House and Senate Taxes Committees submit that information within 60 days following final enactment to the Tax Expenditure Review Commission. This language in Section 1 also eliminates the statutory requirement under current law that a bill creating or continuing a tax expenditure include an expiration date for that tax expenditure. Finally, the language provides that the proposed requirement that the House and Senate tax chairs submit purpose statements to the Tax Expenditure Review Commission is not subject to judicial review.
Thank you, Mr. Arneson. And this was a provision that came about for a number of reasons, and I know that Senator Rest might have comments on purpose statements. Something that typically we've not done in legislation is purpose statements.
I'll trade them for the renter's credit.
Senator Rest, say that again?
I said if we can get rid of them, they can have the renter's credit.
We'll take that, we'll jot that down. All right. But so one of the issues was putting in purpose statements and also then how to evaluate and getting that into legislation. But we thought we could serve the same purpose if by that certain date, tax chairs submitted those. It just kind of was kind of like being a little bit more efficient in how we get to the same answer or to the same point. So that was kind of the genesis of that. Then we'll go on with, I think we're over, in the House, you had Section 35 provides tax expenditure purposes statements. You had nothing else on that, Mr. Williams? All right, why don't you move on then to Section 1 in the House?
Chair Nelson and members, Section 1 of the House language pertains to the Tax Expenditure Review Commission. Section 1, the Review Commission has an initial period of review during which they're going to be focusing on identifying purpose statements for tax expenditures. Under current law, that initial period is required to last 3 years. In the House, language would change that requirement to make it not more than 3 years. So if they were able to complete that initial review period more quickly, they'd be permitted to do so under Section 1. Section 2 of the bill, I think, pertains to a concern actually Senator Bach raised during the Tax Expenditure Review Commission hearing. It's largely a technical change describing when the report the Tax Expenditure Review Commission produces, the sort of period of review that would be covered by that report. So it just requires that the report cover the Commission's activities in that current year. Section 3 of the bill relates to June accelerated sales taxes and other accelerated payments of sales taxes. So there's a provision in last year's tax bill that dedicated money in the November forecast to paying down the June accelerated sales tax percentage. The House language applies sort of a similar provision to the November forecast for other taxes, so it applies to mortgage and deed taxes, cigarette tobacco taxes, liquor excise taxes. So there would be a percentage paid down on the June accelerated portion for those taxes as well, under Section 3 of the House bill. Section 4 of the House language pertains to the revenue recapture program. And it disallows nonprofit hospitals that lease land from a city or a county to participate in the revenue recapture program for repayment of debts.
Mr. Williams?
Chair Nelson and members, Mr. Arneson reminded me that there's also a similar age shift in Article 3 or in Section 3 of the House language. So you see that in the last sentence of this summary section there. So certain aid payments due July 20th would be and would pay a reduced portion on March 15th. So that's also.
Could you say that again, please, into the mic a little louder?
Senator Nelson and members, sure. So the Commissioner of Revenue under Section 3 of the House language would also reduce the percentage of certain aid payments that are typically July 20th and pay those portion on March 15th instead. And that's also tied to the November forecast numbers.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair, members, Section 2 on the Senate side relates to a report of expiring tax expenditures and proposes to require the Commissioner to report on October 1st of each year to the Legislature, listing each tax expenditure that would expire before July 1st of the following calendar year, absent any legislative enactments.
Thank you, Mr. Arneson. This came as a result of the year that the Angel investor tax credit somehow expired and the legislature was caught off guard. So we don't want things like that to happen again. Thank you, Mr. Arneson. Mr. Williams.
Chair Nelson and members, sections 5, 6, and 7 of the House language are conforming changes related to that June accelerated policy I just described. So section 5 pertains to the mortgage registry and deed tax. Section 6 is another conforming change. That's the deed tax as well. And 7 is also the mortgage registry and deed set tax.
One question before we leave the June accelerated piece. The mortgage and deed tax, was that part of the June accelerated, as was the June accelerated that we removed last year? In other words, it was done as a budget solving measure. It included sales and use tax, June accelerated, mortgage deed tax. I just want to make sure that all of those were kind of lumped into the same reason for existence. Mr. Williams.
Chair Nelson and members, Mr. Clem is the expert on this topic in our committee right now, but my understanding is that those are shifts.
Okay, we'll just go right to the expert, Mr. Kline.
Madam Chair and members, I think the answer is yes. All the June accelerated provisions for the alcohol gross receipts tax, the mortgage and deed tax, cigarette and tobacco tax, they all create a shift in the budget from one fiscal year to the current fiscal year. So I think you can lump them all into the same category.
Thank you. That was just my question. All right. Then let's see. We are on. I don't know if you addressed Article 6, Mr. Williams, in the House bill.
Chair Nelson and members, I finished through sections 6 and 7. Those are just conforming changes for the June accelerated.
Okay, terrific. Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair, members, section 3 on the Senate side deals with the withholding required for certain periodic and non-periodic payments or distributions from employer deferred compensation plans, retirement plans, and certain commercial annuities. These distributions right now are subject to Minnesota tax withholding unless the recipient opts out of withholding. The current law would require that the withholding amount be determined under withholding tax tables as if the distribution were a payment of wages. And the proposal here would provide that the withholding rate is a flat 6.25% or another rate specified by the recipient.
I thank you. Some clarifying language. Further comments? Okay, very good. Mr. Williams.
Chair Nelson and members, House Section 8 is the Homestead Credit State Refund, or the Homeowner Property Tax Refund Program. The House provision would increase the maximum refund by $200 for all income ranges. It would reduce the threshold percentages, so the percentage of your income that property tax would have to constitute in order to qualify for a refund, by 0.1% for individuals with household incomes between $21,410 and $33,120. And also reduces the copay percentages by 5% for claimants with households and incomes between $33,120 and $77,870. And that would be effective for 2022 refunds payable in 2023. Section 9 of the House language is the additional property tax refund program, also sometimes called the targeting refund. So the provision would increase or lower the threshold percentage from 12% to 10%. And it would also increase the maximum refund from $1,000 to $2,000, and again, effective for 2022 refunds payable next year.
Thank you. Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair, the Senate section is identical.
Thank you. And then we move to Section 9, the inflation adjustment. Mr. Williams.
Chair Nelson and members, Section 10 of the House language is just a conforming change for the Homestead Credit State Refund for the inflation adjustment.
And I see no comparable position, Mr. Arneson. Okay. Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair, the next 3 sections on the Senate side all relate to the combined net receipts tax. Section 4, excuse me. Typically, the appropriation amount for compulsive and problem gambling programs is calculated as a function of the combined net receipts tax. Section 4 provides that for fiscal 24 and 25 only, the appropriation for those compulsive and problem gambling programs must be calculated without regard to the changes proposed in the next section with regard to the first and second tax brackets and the first tier rate. It's essentially holding those programs harmless against any modifications to the combined net receipts tax.
Thank you, Mr. Arneson. And then we move to, I think you already mentioned this, Mr. Williams, section 11.
Chair
regarding
Nelson and
accelerated
members.
payment.
Madam Chair, I might just kind of finish sections 5 and 6. Section
Yes.
5 is the section that proposes the modification to the combined net receipts tax. It changes the breakpoint between the first and second tax brackets and reduces the tax rate applicable to the first bracket. And finally, section 6 is the section modifying the baseline revenue amounts that are the input to the function determining how much money from the combined net receipts tax is transferred to the stadium reserve account in the general fund. And this modification would affect the amount of the transfer for fiscal 2024 and later.
Thank you, Mr. Arneson. All right. Yes, Chair Davids, Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if we could just go back, this one kind of got by me kind of quick here. I think it's a very important Senate provision in Article 9, Section 3, miscellaneous withholding arrangements. I've had some, I think, productive discussions with the department on this issue. And maybe if the department could just say if the Senate language kind of clears up what we had talked about, because annuity payments are one thing, but to have the annuitant have to go through the withholding tax tables as if it was distribution or payment of wages, which it's not. I guess I would just ask Ms. Bears, does the Senate language work for the department? Because the way it looks to me, I'm very thankful the Senate has this in there. It just cleans things up a lot.
I'm Ms. Bears.
Madam Chair, Representative Davids, for the record, my name is Joanna Bears. I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of Revenue. And Madam Chair, Representative Davids, yes, after our conversations, we continued that conversation with board, and we came up with a solution that's in the Senate bill that works for the department and works for stakeholders.
Okay, thank you, and thank you to the department for that, because it was no fault of the department that we got into this situation because of some federal law changes, and we missed it over in the House side, or I missed it, I should say. But I think that language there really clears things up nicely. Thank you to the department and Mr. Innes.
Thank you, Representative Davids, and the department, Mr. Innes. We do appreciate clarity. This is what we do here. All right. Next, I believe we are on to, let's see, are we at section 8 here for the House? Did you talk about the homestead credit state refund?
Chair Nelson and members, I
Mr.
think we're on
Williams.
section 11 of the House language. The header is accelerated payment.
All right, here we go.
So sections 11 and 12 of the House bill are further language related to the June accelerated provision that was
Oh, yes.
described earlier.
Yep, yes.
Sec-
We are ready to move on to, I believe, Article 10. Oh, we started that. All right. Let's move to section 12.
And
Mr. Williams.
Chair Nelson and members, section 12 is also a June accelerated provision that was covered earlier substantively. Section 13 pertains to the solid waste tax. So it increases the allocation of revenues from the solid waste management tax to the environmental fund from 70% to 73%, and provides that the difference in revenues under the bill must be devoted to score grants, state score grants.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair and members, the next 3 rows on the Senate side all relate to the allocation of the production tax. Section 7 on the Senate side eliminates a 5-cent increased allocation of the production tax to the County Road and Bridge Fund that under current law would begin with distributions beginning in 2024. The next section proposes to extend an additional 5 cents for 10 years through 2033 to the Iron Range Education Account. And finally, I'll finish summarizing the Senate provisions. On the next page, the next Senate side provision proposes to distribute an additional 5 cents beginning in 2034 to the Taconite Environmental Fund.
And Chair Nelson.
And Mr. Williams.
Chair Nelson and members, the House provisions are similar. House Section 14 would extend the additional 5 cents for 20 years. And then correspondingly, Section 15, the additional 5 cents from the distribution going to the environmental fund would begin in 2044. And Chair Nelson and members, I believe Mr. Cope is going to cover the second half of the miscellaneous article.
Mr. Cope.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Sections 16 through 25 are house-only provisions that would create a new chapter in Minnesota statutes allowing for the creation of tourism improvement districts. Section 16 defines terms for the proposed new chapter, including defining business as a lodging business and defining impacted business owners as a majority of business owners in the district. Section 17 would allow a municipality to establish a tourism improvement district after receiving a petition from impacted business owners and after holding a public hearing. Section 18 would authorize a municipality to impose service charges to fund activities or improvements in the tourism improvement district if the activity or improvement was provided in the TID at an increased level of service. Section 19 provides for modification of an ordinance establishing a tourism improvement district and allows modification after a public hearing if the change is requested by the Tourism Improvement Association. Section 20 authorizes municipalities, tourism improvement associations, and other designated entities to collect service charges and to charge interest and penalties for delinquent payments. Section 21 would require that an ordinance establishing a tourism improvement district also designate a tourism improvement association, which is comprised of a majority of the business owners that would be paying the service charges or their representatives. And the Tourism Improvement Association would be in charge of managing the funds raised by the service charge. Section 22 requires a petition from impacted business owners prior to a municipality's establishing a tourism improvement district. Section 23 requires that an ordinance establishing a tourism improvement district have an effective date at least 45 days after the ordinance is adopted. And during that time, it will allow impacted business owners to veto the ordinance. Section 24 requires that an ordinance establishing a tourism improvement district include an annual 30-day review period during which impacted business owners could petition to have the tourism improvement district disestablished. And Section 25 would prohibit a city or town from establishing a tourism improvement district in the area where a county has already established a tourism improvement district, and vice versa. Section 26 is another house-only provision which would modify the Workforce and Affordable Homeownership Development Program by allowing the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency to issue loans as well as grants by establishing an account in the Housing Development Fund where loan repayments would be deposited to fund future grants and loans under the program, and requiring Minnesota Management and Budget to annually appropriate $10 million in proceeds from the state's mortgage registry and deed taxes to that account from fiscal years 2023 through fiscal year 2030. Section 27, which is another house-only provision, corresponds to changes in timing of aid payments, which Mr. Williams earlier discussed. This section would reduce the amount of first half aid payments due July 20th based on the Commissioner's determinations pursuant to Section 3 of Article 10, and with the remaining amount of first half aid payments being paid on March 15th. Section 28 exempts bonds issued by the City of Virginia to finance the construction of a public safety building from counting towards the city's debt limits. The Senate has a similar provision in Article 4, Section 25. The only differences between the two provisions are the effective date. The House provision would be effective upon certification of local approval of the law, while the Senate provision would be effective the day following final enactment. Sections 29 and 30 both relate to increased utility costs during the polar vortex in February of 2021. Section 29 would require utility companies to calculate the increased energy costs caused by the vortex, which were imposed on consumers, and would allow a utility company to seek reimbursement if it drew upon reserves to cover energy costs of the vortex. The section appropriates $20 million to the Commissioner of Commerce to fund reimbursement. Section 30 would allow taxpayers to claim a refundable credit for excess energy costs paid as a result of the vortex, relying upon the disclosures created by utility companies pursuant to Section 29. Section 31, would be creating an income tax subtraction for individuals, estates, trusts, and C corporations that received various forms of COVID business assistance. Section 32 would be establishing a one-time aid program that appropriates $75 million in fiscal year 2023 to counties to fund economic assistance and rental assistance, with $50 million going to economic assistance and $25 million going to rental assistance. Economic assistance funds would be distributed to counties on a per capita basis and can be used to provide economic assistance to underserved communities, to aid businesses which did not have revenue in 2019 and were therefore ineligible to receive assistance from business assistance programs in 2020 and 2021. And it could also be used to provide aid to venues that lost revenue due to COVID-19. The rental assistance payments would be allocated to counties based on each county's share of renters' households paying more than 30% of household income towards rent. Section 33 of Article 10 would authorize the Ely School District to issue up to $9,500,000 in bonds for school facilities and buildings, and would exempt those bonds from any limits on indebtedness for the district. Section 34 would require the Department of Revenue to report to the legislature in 2023 on free filing options, including a review of free filing options in other states, an analysis of needs and a description of alternative options for free filing. Section 35 includes tax purpose statements for expenditures in the House bill for the purposes of complying with Minnesota Statutes 3.192. The Senate has no comparable provision, but as was discussed earlier, the Senate has a provision in Article 9, Section 1, that would be amending the purpose statement requirement. Last, Section 36 appropriates $175,000 in fiscal year 2023 to the Department of Revenue for the free filing report required under Section 34.
Thank you, Mr. Cope. We're ready to move on to House Article 11, Senate Article 10. Chair Youakim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick, I would have asked this question during last because I'm still trying to understand the Lake of the Woods lodging tax. But wondering if it, and I can talk to, I think, Senator Bach later about it. Carleton County did a phenomenal job with annual reporting and it really is solid. And I'm wondering if it's structured that way. But the reason why I bring this up is our miscellaneous article really tries to focus not just on citizens that were hit the hardest by COVID, but also businesses that were hit the hardest by COVID, whether it's having the income subtraction for business assistance or expanding the way we do those that qualified for the business assistance and then the business and county aid, and then the tourism improvement district as well. Just like the lodging taxes we're looking at in tourism businesses, our regional centers that have convention centers like Rochester and Duluth and Minneapolis and St. Paul were really hit incredibly hard by COVID and not being able to have those convention centers full for their hotel industries. And it's one of the industries that's lagging the furthest behind. And I would really ask the Senate to consider the Tourism Improvement District because this is locally based. They have to work with their local government. It is an opt-in that they work, and it has a lot of bookends around it in annual reporting. And I think we really need to look at that hotel industry and how hard it was hit by COVID and try to figure out a way to help them out. And That's why also the Lake of the Woods I'm interested in, because I know the resort owners on the northwest angle had a very unique and intriguing issue too when it came to accessing their resorts during the summer months when they couldn't have their ice road to get up there. So hope we can continue those conversations.
Thank you, Chair Joachim. Just to note, on that transportation, or that tourism improvement district, I heard you say opt-in. Can individual hotels or individual businesses opt in?
The hotels actually have to petition the city to actually start a tourism improvement district, and that has to be over 50% of them.
Chair Yukim, though, can individual establishments opt in or opt out?
It's just the hotels, and that's worked out amongst themselves, so we
So
can talk about
Can the
that.
individual hotels opt in or opt out?
I would have to ask the testifier because it's Representative Dabney's bill, and I don't know of it in detail as much as he does. But
Okay, well, we'll bring that person up. I'm not sure who that would be. Who would that be? Oh, because that is an important distinction. We've had this bill before, and one of the concerns was that there was not opt-in for individual businesses. Individual hotels may be forced to opt in and may not want to. But please, introduce yourself for the record and bring some clarity to this.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and Chair Joachim. My name is Sarah Pasik, and I represent Meet Minneapolis, which is the Convention and Visitors Bureau for the Minneapolis area. The proposal, I think you've had some letters in your packet yesterday and a handout. While I'm here on behalf of Meet Minneapolis, it's supported by quite a large number of Convention and Visitor Bureaus across the state, including the statewide Minnesota Association of Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is supportive, and the Greater Minneapolis Hotel Association. So it's modeled after special service districts, but it is not a property tax assessment, which is what special service districts are. This creates and authorizes enabling legislation to create a tourism improvement district, which would be a charge on a hotel night stay, either a dollar amount of $1 or $2 or like a 1% charge. And it is dedicated and specifically stated to benefit those businesses paying it. So your specific question about can a hotel opt in or out is that they cannot, but it requires at least 50% of those lodging businesses to petition and ask the local government to create a tourism improvement district. And, the goal would not to be to have 50%, but to have 75%, 80%, 90%, 100% of those lodging businesses want to form this. And, similar to a special service district, everybody in the district benefits from the revenues that are raised and the services that are provided. So in a tourism improvement district, all the hotels in the district would benefit from those activities that the dollars raised are going toward. So that's why it doesn't really make sense to say you could be opt to not be in the tourism improvement district, because by nature you would still benefit from those activities because they're not specific to the one hotel paying, collecting a $1 or $2 a night charge. The benefits of a tourism improvement district benefit all the lodging properties in that district. And if I can just add, hotels especially have really, really suffered during COVID. Our model of hotel stays is different. While convention business is slightly coming back, business travel is just significantly down. And so, these cities and communities and counties are having to reimagine how they fill hotels, how they market the areas, how they promote, and there's a lot of employment in hotels, and then the benefits to your surrounding restaurants and bars and attractions and museums, theaters, all those things benefit from full hotels. And so that's the goal of this. We know that tourism, and that is a slow recovery. Full recovery is still 2 or 3 years down the road. So we're trying to reimagine how to fill those hotels. And one last thing, since I have the opportunity, tourism improvement districts are a new idea to Minnesota, But over 20 states have these, and they've been around for about 20 years. South Dakota has had tourism improvement districts for about 12 years. So there's something that has been proved to work, and are a model. We're not creating something new, we're just bringing the idea to Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to
Yes.
provide more information.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Pissick.
Madam Chair?
Chair Yuki?
Just a quick clarifying question, just so I can get it straight in my head from nonpartisan staff. With the lodging tax, do hotels have an opportunity to opt, individual hotels have an opportunity to opt out of that?
Ms. Pollock?
Madam Chair, Representative Joachim, no, it would be the local jurisdiction that's imposing the tax, and it would be, it's imposed on any lodging, unit of lodging that I believe is, the typical definition of a motel or hotel, like for 30 days or less, that kind of thing. But there's not an opt-out provision.
And, Madam Chair?
Chair Yuki?
Ms. Pollock, is the city required to get the permission of more than 50% of the hotels to impose that lodging tax? Or my understanding is by statute, they can automatically do 3%.
Ms. Pollock?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, Representative Joachim, I missed the last half of your
Oh,
question.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock, I'm sorry. It's my understanding that the local jurisdictions can automatically in statute do the 3% and don't have to have that communication with their hotel or hotels or require 50% buy-in or anything like that.
Ms. Pollock?
Madam Chair, Representative Joachim, yes, I believe there's a requirement for a resolution, and I'll check on that in the general law now, but correct, a local jurisdiction has an authority under general law to impose a lodging tax of up to 3% without separate legislative authority.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think members were ready to move on to, which would be House Article 11 and Senate Article 10. This is Department of Revenue Policy and Technical Partnership Taxes. Short 2 sections. Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair, maybe I can provide a shortcut to the end of the walkthrough and indicate to you and the committee that the remaining articles are only the Department of Revenue Policy and Technical articles, and are identical to the form of those articles when they were heard and amended in the Senate side. And both the House and the Senate sections in these remaining articles are identical.
Thank you, Mr. Arneson. I do see that. And I think I'll see if there's any comments or questions. I think we're all pretty well informed on that. And so with that, members, and thank you, Mr. Arneson, you get kudos today for that, shortening that up. So members, I think that we've had a good couple days here of going through the difference between the bills, between the Senate and the House. My intention now is that we will be taking a recess to the call of the chair. Chair Marquart and I will be working diligently, going over these things and looking at how we can proceed. We do know the clock is ticking. Our intention is to get something done soon, so that I'll just give you my little game plan here. We want to beat the HHS bill to the revisers. That's the plan, all right? So, okay, with that, we are adjourned to the call of the chair. Thank you so much.